Hello, I'm Frank Roseman. I'm standing as the English Democrats candidate for the cities of London and Westminster in the general election. I'm asking for your support in my election campaign, and here I outline my understanding of the causes of our present economic problems and my suggestions as to how they can be answered. Many will find these ideas radical. However, the world is changing, and if we're to survive and our children to prosper, we have to put the economics of our nation in order. George Bernard Shaw, the philosopher, said that a government with the policy of robbing Peter to pay Paul can be assured of the support of Paul. Our present system rests upon this contention. However, the way in which it's interpreted is that the state takes 100 from Peter, you, keeps 95 for itself, and gives 5 to Paul to justify the theft from Peter. Our problem is not directly the level of taxation, but the corruption and waste that flows from this level of taxation. History repeatedly demonstrates that if you give people control of money they've not earned, they will waste, steal, and fritter it away. We're facing an economic and social collapse because we're paying many of our most capable, best educated, and intelligent members of society not to work and create wealth. Instead, we're paying them as if they are creating wealth to sit in offices or even at home and actually prevent or obstruct the wealth creation process. We're paying millions of these quality people to be occupied in non-jobs, and more importantly, we're paying them at a level that exceeds the payment available to a person in the wealth creating sector. For anyone unsure as to the truth of these observations, I refer them to the recruitment section of the Guardian newspaper, where they can read the advertisements and decide for themselves. As well as paying state employees far above the economic rate relevant to the contribution they make to the nation's welfare, we then compound the felony by giving them pensions and benefits packages that are well outside any economic justification and unavailable to those normally available in the private sector. The cost of these pensions and future benefits are unfunded and fall upon the shoulders of our children, our future taxpayers. All salaries in the nation, of both people who have to create wealth and those that draw their income from the taxes the wealth creators pay, are ultimately paid only by those wealth creators. In any situation, personal, corporate, or governmental, present expenditure can only come from 3 sources: wealth earned today, wealth saved from the past, and wealth borrowed against future earnings. And our present government's programme of expenditure, materially accepted by all the main political parties, taps all of these sources at a rate never seen before, transferring vast amounts of wealth from the shrinking wealth-creating sector in our nation by a vast array of direct, indirect, and stealth taxes. The government is also liquidating our national assets and devaluing our currency by printing money, thereby devaluing the value of savings held by those people capable and prudent enough to have saved for their future. Not content with stealing from the wealth creators, the government is stealing from our children by borrowing and spending those borrowings upon the salaries and wages of state employees under the excuse of investing in public services. These borrowed funds are actually a transfer of wealth from the future to today, and will have to be repaid by future taxpayers, our children, who will suffer a corresponding dramatic fall in their living standard. Public sector debt is predicted to rise to 77% of national income in 2014 by Alistair Darling, and he always underestimates. This amount of admitted debt is nationally crippling. We have a wide variety of so-called services that, when compared with other countries, are generously financed, however provide a relatively poor and grossly uneconomic service for their cost to the taxpayer. For example, a state education service that largely fails to educate, a police service that fails to police the streets, a refuse collection service that in many areas effectively refuses to collect refuse, and a national health service that again largely poorly supplies health services, as seen this week with revelations of negligence, incompetence and dishonesty at Stafford Hospital. An interesting article by Minette Marin in the Sunday Times of the 21st of February nicely illustrates the point that taxpayer-paid state employees have become the new first class and are able to avoid the social chaos their failure has created, leaving the people they serve, the man and woman in the street, to struggle in the mess the state employees have created. In the same newspaper, another article by Harriet Sargent points out the basic failure of our state education service and the fact that many children leave school, quote, without the basic skills to hold down a job, unquote, and in many cases are incapable of retaining a job even when given one. Similarly, the fact that of 1.7 million jobs created since 1997, over 80% could not be filled by English people, and that capable employees had to be recruited from abroad. Repeatedly in all state-controlled services, the salaries and benefits of the staff have grown while the people they are supposed to serve have suffered. How do we remedy this? We have to accept that the role in English society of the state has to be drastically reduced, and that the focus upon paying state employees as though they're creating wealth where they are not has to stop. We have to dramatically cut funds available to the state by reducing taxes, by reducing the power of government to borrow, and we have to legally prevent the government from printing money. Only by reducing the funds available to government will we force upon the state economies that the nation requires to survive. And I suggest the following steps. Government total expenditure should be statutorily limited to a maximum of 33% of national income. Salaries payable to the majority of state employees should be limited to that of the national average wage. Similarly, pensions payable to state employees should be subject to the same taxation and market forces that private pensions are. In other words, privileged state pensions for state employees should cease to exist, and they would face the economic realities that wealth creators face. These measures would force the taxpayer-paid state employees to become more responsible and move them from being exploiters of the wealth creators to being motivated to see the income of the average wage earner increase and the country prospering. As a benchmark, all state employees should not be privileged above the basic wealth creator and, for example, should always have to travel economy class on public transport. After all, why should our servants be treated better than the people who pay them? This would also give them the incentive to ensure that public transport was safe, clean and efficient. All state employee benefits should be subject to full audit and published annually. Any material deception would lead to the offender being prosecuted, dismissed and becoming unemployable within state employment for 5 years. This would have kept Peter Mandelson out of public life. If you agree with me that we have to radically reduce taxes, reduce state waste, reduce the size of government, reduce the interference of government in the lives of the wealth-creating people who pay for the state, and also reduce the amount taken from the wealth creators by the state, then I ask you to support me in the following ways. Firstly, give me your vote, and also give me your verbal support by telling your family, friends and colleagues about us and our mission. Give me your active support by joining our branch, it only costs £50, and participating in our campaign at a level that suits you. Give me your financial support by making a £100 donation or whatever donation you feel able to make. Please note that all English Democrat candidates are self-funding, and donations will be used honestly to promote the message of democracy by leaflet drops, advertising and promotional activities, and will be fully and openly audited. I'd like to conclude by quoting the philosopher Edmund Burke. All that is required for evil to prosper is that good men stand aside and do nothing. Please do not stand aside, and please support me in all ways you can to fight racism, fascism, and bring democracy and a sensible economy to England. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to having your support and your vote, of course, on May the 6th.